Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio, and today I just want you to pontificate this question. Will Velma become a cult classic? Right, you're seeing a lot of talk of this show online from everybody left, right, up, down, center, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Everybody seems to be hating this show. Well, I came across this article from Comic Book Resources that is titled right here, Velma's terrible reviews may end up saving the show. Velma has received some of the worst reviews from audiences of any show. Surprisingly, this seems to have only helped the show's popularity. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking before we go into this article. Oh, this is Comic Book Resources just running defense for Velma because they're shills, they're get woke go broke. Actually, listen to the argument that is being presented. Don't just read a fucking headline and jump to that fucking conclusion, because all you do is you make yourself sound like a goddamn idiot, right? HBO's Velma is not the greatest show. Whoa, wait a minute. If we just read the headline and some Phantom Menace members like Yellow Flash, just from the headline, Yellow Flash just said, well, Comic Book Resources is running defense for this show. And yes, he actually said that in one of his videos. If I can find that clip, I'll put it up right here.
Despite overwhelming evidence that this is garbage, people still praise it like it's doing well. CBR.com here, proving themselves to be complete clowns and morons once again, saying Velma's terrible reviews may end up saving the show. Repeating that bullshit from Parrot Analytics that makes it sound like this show is doing really well. They don't just take views, they take people talking about a show, and they don't differentiate between people talking positively and negatively. People that are talking negatively about this show aren't going to watch season 2. They're not watching season 1 either. What they're doing is watching the endless content of people making fun of this show, and they're watching it because it's entertaining. It's more entertaining to make fun of this show than watch it. They're not watching the show. A YouTube video doing well doesn't mean that Velma is doing well, especially if the videos are trashing this shit show. But CBR has to ride the fence. They have to ride the fence because while they'll put articles out making fun of Velma, they'll also put out a shitload of articles defending Velma. Because at the end of the day, they're a defense task force for Hollywood. They are shills. They have the dick and balls firmly in the mouth, and they've got to work it really good so Hollywood can keep going and keep it up. And that's the job of fluffer. CBR.com, I think of them as like the porn industry has fluffers. That's CBR.com. They are the fluffer of modern entertainment journalism.
So yeah, just from reading the headline, he said, this article is running defense. But yet, in the very first sentence, HBO's Velma is not the greatest show. So wait a minute, I thought that this was running defense. How come they're admitting that it's not the great? They're saying it right here as a matter of opinion. HBO's Velma is not the greatest show. Anyway, I've tangented for too long, so let's just continue. HBO's Velma is not the greatest show, but is it as bad as reviews would suggest? Velma's rating on IMDb is 1.3 out of 10, and as of the recording of this video, the rating has jumped from 1.3 out of 10 to 1.4 out of 10. It hasn't jumped up by that much. And its Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 6%, and at the time of recording this, that number is still accurate. This means that the show is rated lower than legendarily bad movies like The Room or Troll 2. This could lead some people to believe that Velma must be one of the worst shows ever made, but in truth, it's just kind of mediocre. Well, wait a minute. I thought that this article was running defense for Velma. Now they're saying that the show is kind of mediocre at best. Why aren't they saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread? If they're running defense. That being said, viewers haven't exactly rushed to correct the hyperbolic negative response because the show isn't good enough to inspire a strong defense of it. Again, all within the first paragraph. I thought that this article was running defense for Velma and HBO Max and Mindy Kaling. But even they're admitting the show's not great, and it's not even good enough to whip up the other side into a frenzy to come out and defend it like some people do with The Last Jedi. However, the extremely low ratings may actually end up being the best thing for Velma. Hearing that a show is average, boring, or just kind of bad is probably the worst thing that can happen to its viewership. On the other hand, when people see reviews claiming Velma is the worst show ever made, that creates a level of morbid curiosity. Audiences will likely be inspired to see it for themselves. I added an extra word. To see for themselves if Velma is really as bad as the reviews say. There are also plenty of viewers who intentionally seek out bad shows and movies to mock and laugh at with friends. If left alone, Velma would likely have faded into obscurity, but the large amount of negative attention may have given it new life. So let's go into, here's their first point. Velma's haters unintentionally signal boosted the show. Despite the negative reviews, Velma's viewership is much higher than other shows. While some of this popularity can be chalked up to the show's connection to the popular Scooby-Doo brand, it seems likely that it is in part due to the amount of attention being paid to the show online. Though Velma's IMDb user ratings are very low, it is the second most popular show on the site, and as of the recording of this video, it is currently the 9th most popular show on IMDb. So the popularity has waned, but again, it's only waned by about 7 spots. It's not like it dropped from number 2 to number 5,000 overnight. Let's be real here. But where was I? Though Velma's IMDb user ratings are very low, it is the second most popular show on the site. We just debunked that, only losing out to HBO's other hit series, The Last of Us. There are also plenty of YouTube videos talking about the series. Even if many of these videos fall into the same category as the exaggeratedly bad reviews, they still contribute to Velma trending online. If Velma continues to receive so much attention, it will only continue to find a wider audience as more people's curiosity is piqued by its cultural relevance. If it continues to trend online, more content creators and websites will also be inspired to give their own takes on the show, perpetuating the show's popularity. Had Velma been given more realistically negative reviews instead of being touted as the worst show ever, it probably wouldn't have become such an online trend. And let's go back to the Oscar Wilde school of thought when it comes to dealing with press. Right, Oscar Wilde said something to the effect of Oscar Wilde said something to the effect of, and I'm sorry, I'm getting it a little confused. I believe he said there is no such thing as bad. There is no difference between good press and bad press, and the only bad press is when the press is no longer talking about you. Right, so again, going back to the idea of Velma's haters unintentionally signal boosted the show. Hey, you hate the show and you're gonna make 50 fucking videos on your YouTube channel saying how it's the worst show ever and get woke, go broke, and it's a psyop by the U.S. government. You want to drink that fucking Alex Jones sauce? Guess what? You're making the show just that much more popular because, is it really as bad as everyone is making it out to be? And here's the second point they go into. Velma doesn't live up to the high or low expectations. Velma is far from the worst show ever made, but it also isn't very good. Many of its jokes fall flat or just don't feel very creative. For example, Norville proclaiming that he doesn't like drugs almost feels like the writers were too busy patting themselves on the back for not leaning into the easiest Shaggy joke that they forgot to write a replacement. Watching the show divorced from the online hype, audiences will likely find that Velma inspires no strong feelings one way or the other. The only real aspect of Velma that makes it stand out from the competition is the intense backlash to the show online. Thanks to the people who hate the show the most, Velma has become a trendy conversation piece instead of simply a lackluster adult animated show. There's also a chance that some viewers who check out Velma due to their hate stick around when they realize it isn't as bad as it's meant to be. Viewers' rock bottom expectations may actually make the show seem better in contrast. This, combined with the inflated viewership, may actually mean that Velma's status as one of the worst reviewed shows could actually be the only thing that gives the show the viewership it needs to survive. Right? Actually sit back and just ponder that idea. if everybody had just universally decided to leave Velma alone, we are not going to talk about it because we know it's going to be dog shit. I knew it was going to be dog shit before it came out. That's why I've never watched it, and I have not talked about it up to this point. And I don't mean to put myself up on a fucking pedestal because I'm just as guilty about talking about shows and movies that I knew were dog shit, like The Book of Boba Fett, Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. So I will come out and I will say I am just as guilty as some of these other channels as these other channels that are chalking up Velma. But still, actually ponder the idea. If people were not coming out and decrying Velma as the worst show ever made, would it have faded into obscurity? Right? Think about what happened with directors like Ed Wood. Right? Ed Wood, the guy that made Plan 9 from Outer Space. Right, Plan 9 from Outer Space comes out. So I almost said 1959, but that was Night of the Ghouls. Right, Plan 9 from Outer Space comes out in 1957. Guess what happened? It faded into relative obscurity. In fact, he sold the rights to that movie for only $1. Right, it wasn't until the 1980s when a film critic wrote a book called The Golden Turkey Awards and decried Plan 9 from Outer Space as the worst movie ever made. Ed Wood as one of the worst filmmakers of all time. And Plan 9 from Outer Space would not reach true cult classic status until Tim Burton came out with the 1994 film titled Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp. But still, had people not been coming out and decrying that Plan 9 from Outer Space was the worst movie ever made, would anybody have given a shit about Plan 9 from Outer Space? Would anyone have unironically sought out Plan 9 from Outer Space, even if it was just a joke about it, right? Honestly, think about that. Same with The Room with Tommy Wiseau, right? It's often referred to as the Citizen Kane of bad movies. So again, you're putting it up on this pedestal as The Room is one of the worst movies ever made. It's the quote unquote Citizen Kane of bad movies. Would anybody give a shit, right? I'm losing my train of thought here. So I'm gonna take a little bit of a short break and then just come right back. In fact, some of these movies are so bad that some scenes from these movies have become iconic in other ways, right? Actually take a look from scenes from these movies. I'm gonna play them to you back to back, and I guarantee you, even if you have never seen the movies for yourself, you are probably aware of some of these scenes or some of these lines. You may have heard of them, referenced in other shows like comedies or even other movies. Doesn't matter, right? You're probably actually familiar with some of these references, intentionally or not.
How could somebody misfile something? What could be easier? It's all alphabetical. You just put it in the right file, according to alphabetical order. A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Huh? That's all you have to do.
Very good. You know your alphabet.
I never misspelled anything! Not once, not one time!
Alva, there is no one else in this entire office that I could possibly ask to share such a horrible job. You're the lowest on the totem pole here, Alva. The lowest. Do you realize that? Every other secretary who's been here longer than you, Alva. Every one. And even if there was someone here who was here just one day longer than you, I still wouldn't ask that person to partake in such a miserable job as long as you were around. That's right, Alva. It's a horrible, horrible job, sifting through old contract after old contract. I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand? Do you? Good.
did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
You are lying. I never hit you. You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
What is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Oh, my eyes! Eyes! Ah! Ah!
So again, circling back to the topic, to the topic that I wanted you to ponder, will Velma become a cult classic? In my opinion, all of the telltale signs are there, right? The IMDb score being a 1.4 out of 10, one of the worst reviewed shows on IMDb, right? Rotten Tomatoes, only a 6% audience score. Again, one of the lowest rated shows on both Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. How many people are gonna watch the show for themselves and go, well, is it really as bad as they make it out to be? And you know, if these Fandom Menace channels truly just left this show alone, I truly believe it would have faded into obscurity. Nobody would even talk about it beyond the first season, right? Publications like Comic Book Resources, IndieWire, sure, they may still talk about Velma, but other than them, nobody would have been talking about the show because nobody would have given a damn. Look what happened with Andor recently. Oh, dry throat, right? Look what happened with Andor recently, right? You had these reviews coming out saying it's the best Star Wars show on Disney Plus right now. But according to Parrot Analytics, and I did a video on this at the time, I don't remember what I titled it, so I do apologize. What was it? Andor, a Star Wars story? I think it was just called Andor, right? Andor had the lowest audience demand of any Star Wars show on Disney Plus up to that point. And the idea is that, you know, you can only release so much crap for so long before people just simply give up, right? People, you know, Star Wars fans finally said, you know what, enough's enough. I'm not even going to check out Andor. Will they check out Andor 10, 20 years from now? I don't know. I personally can't answer that because we simply don't know, right? I'm not Chris Swell here where we can look into the future, you know? Another reference to a really bad movie. But still, you know, if everybody just left Velma alone and just said, you know what, we're not going to talk about it, we're going to move on, we're just going to focus on stuff that we actually like, it would have faded into obscurity. And everybody would have moved on, but no, it's now a trendy topic. You know, how many people that aren't even into, you know, movies and TV shows or aren't like all in on the culture war are now going to chime in on Velma, and then the conversation starts to shift of like, hey, you know, it's really not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. I mean, it's not the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's still not the worst show ever made. Right, it may have all of this negative attention that these Fandom Menace and culture war channels have been giving it may have unironically given this show a second life. Even if it doesn't happen tomorrow, let's say it happens 5-10 years from now, it doesn't matter. It's massive egg on their face because now they're sitting there and have to and now they're thinking, oh my God, if we just left well enough alone, you know, this problem here would have just sorted itself out. We didn't need to come out and to cry, get woke, go broke, and you know how you know Mindy Kaling is pulling a Kevin Smith by destroying a classic franchise, blah 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 blah. Because if the reviews were to be believed, the problem was kind of working itself out. Even if you look at the critics' consensus for season 1 of Velma, right? This coming directly from Rotten Tomatoes. Jinkies, this radical reworking of the beloved mystery team has plenty of attitude and style, but it doesn't have the first clue for how to turn its clever subversion into engaging fun. Right? This problem, simply, in my opinion, would have worked itself out. But because of all these channels like Yellow Flash, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, that Josiah Rises, Ryan Kinnell, RK Outpost, the list goes on. The list goes on and on. Right? if they just left well enough alone, just said, you know what, I'm not gonna engage with this because it looks like that the problem is working itself out. No, let's still talk shit about it to make all that sweet YouTube money, but inadvertently give this show a second life and may actually give it a strong fan base, like, you know, like filmmakers, like, you know, in the sense of like Ed Wood. You know, Ed Wood has a very strong fan base right now because everybody wrote him off as one of the worst filmmakers ever made. Tommy Wiseau still sells out showings to The Room. That man never has to make another movie in his life. He brings The Room for a limited release in a random theater in like San Diego or bumfuck Utah. If he keeps selling out those showings because everyone kept saying that The Room is the Citizen Kane of bad movies. How do you know that this won't happen to Velma sometime down the line? And guys, I'm gonna go ahead and end this right here because I know I've dragged this out way longer than it needs to be, and I am rambling, so I probably should stop. If you guys stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.